Sí, sí.
Molt bona tarda a tothom. Moltes gràcies per haver vingut, malgrat aquest dia plujós i de revolucions estudiantils. Tenim alguns representants. La conferència d'avui la presentarà el professor Josep Maria Terri Cabres. Jo només us vull introduir que el professor Thomas Pogge forma part del Consell Acadèmic Internacional de la Facultat de Medicina i ara estem a punt de començar i em toca dir una petita cosa de housekeeping, que és que aquesta conferència, a part de ser emesa en directe per internet, serà gravada i heu de ser conscients de que es gravarà. Moltes gràcies. Deixo pas als conferenciants.
Moltes gràcies. Bona tarda a tots. Dear Professor Pogge, thank you very much for coming, for being here with us. You have been here for the first time in April 2009. You came invited by the chair Further Mora and by the group of philosophers in this house to explain us a little bit your project. And now you come again, and that's really great, and we thank you very much. Voldria simplement presentar una mica per a aquells que no sàpiguen ben bé qui és Thomas Pogge. És professor de Filosofia i Relacions Internacionals a la Universitat de Yale. Va doctorar-se a la Universitat de Harvard amb una dissertació sobre John Rawls. Rawls és segurament el filòsof polític més més important del segle XX i un dels grans de la filosofia política en la història del pensament. Pogge és autor de molts llibres i articles en temes de filosofia política, especialment relacionats amb el cosmopolitisme, la justícia global i la pobresa. Ell justament és un dels que aconsegueix, diríem, de popularitzar el terme de global justice, del que es tracta, i aquesta és una habilitat que tenen pocs i que el professor Pogge té, i és que els principis una mica abstractes de John Rawls, ell diu bé, aquests principis abstractes potser que els concretéssim, potser que n'arribéssim a fer alguna cosa i que per tant quan parlem de justícia global es notés i passés alguna cosa, i ell treballa en això. Té un llibre molt i molt cèlebre, en té molts, però un que se'n diu Well, Poverty and Human Rights, Cosmopolitan Responsibilities and Reforms. La primera edició va ser de l'any 2002 i aleshores va ser traduïda al castellà per Paidós el 2006, però en canvi hi ha una segona edició que és ampliada i millorada del 2008 i per tant aquesta no està traduïda la primera, però en canvi no la segona. Allò que fa que la contribució de Pogge al debat sobre justícia global sigui original és que elabora un argument punyent a favor del deure negatiu que tenen els rics, països i persones riques en el món, de no mantenir, no continuar alimentant l'actual ordre polític i econòmic internacional, ja que la pobresa del tercer món i la violació dels drets socioeconòmics de la gent del tercer món es deuen en bona part a aquest desordre. En filosofia política sovint es parla de deures positius i deures negatius. Els deures positius són aquells en els quals tu has de fer alguna cosa per l'altra i els deures negatius són aquells en què no fas o has de veure que no es faci des d'un punt de vista de justícia. Els rics tenen, doncs, segons ell, i segons molts, l'obligació de contribuir a l'erradicació de la pobresa global, introduint reformes en les institucions d'abast global. En aquesta línia, allò que fa molt interessant la figura de Pogge és que, a banda dels arguments de caràcter filosòfic i moral, també pensa i promou, com deia abans, propostes concretes, propostes de reforma de les institucions globals i de l'ordre internacional. Actualment està promovent, i d'això ens parlarà avui, conjuntament amb l'economista Aidan Hollis, de la Universitat de Calgary, un fons per a l'impacte en la salut, és aquest Health Impact Fund. La idea és crear un fons, ara ens ho explicarà, que reculli aportacions dels diferents governs del món per tal de fomentar que les indústries farmacèutiques investiguin i elaborin medicaments i tractaments que puguin ajudar la gent que realment ho necessita, no aquells que simplement ho poden pagar. I això seria realment tan revolucionari, que aquesta és la dificultat que sempre se li posa a Pogge, és tan revolucionari que no podrà ser, però ell ja ens ho explicarà segurament. El projecte es troba en un estadi encara preparatori, encara incipient. El professor Pogge es dedica, entre altres coses, a passejar-se pel món explicant-lo, aquest projecte, i mirant de convèncer a tothom que pot, oi, de la bondat del projecte. Ja dic que fa 2 anys ja va ser aquí, oi, i va donant voltes pel món, diríem, i en aquests moments col·labora, treballa, és a dir, col·labora en el Consell Assessor de la nostra Facultat de Medicina, oi? De la Universitat de Girona, cosa que em sembla que és una gran cosa, perquè la nostra universitat, i concretament també Medicina, necessiten d'aquestes grans aportacions internacionals que s'homoguin una mica, que no siguin només tècnicament correctes, sinó que siguin també moralment atrevides. És per això que és un goig tenir el professor Pogge aquí. No sóc jo qui he d'explicar el que ell fa i vol fer, entre altres coses perquè jo potser ho explicaria molt malament. Thank you very much. I just introduced you a little bit, but I hope very much that you can explain us everything, and that after your talk perhaps we can put you some questions in case we have some to put to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, in one respect, I will not be able to explain it better than you because I don't speak Catalan, and so it will have to be in English, and I'm sorry for that. So, I will give you that PowerPoint if you want to keep it and look at it later in your own leisure, and you will be able maybe then to look up one or another thing that was going by a little bit too quickly in the lecture. So I want to update you on this project, the Health Impact Fund project, explain a little bit what it is about, and also tell you where it is now, where it stands. So the current situation, as you know, is a situation of financial difficulty for many of the rich countries. In the wake of the global financial crisis, many rich countries had to tighten their belts and focus on their own problems domestically. So if you go today to governments in the rich countries, or any governments, and say, oh, let's do some new big global initiative, people say, forget about it, that is not a good idea, come back in 5 years and then we will think about it. So it's important, if we want to achieve anything today, to focus on reform projects that are win-win, that are not projects where the rich give to the poor or anybody gives to anybody else, but projects that make everybody better off. And the Health Impact Fund is a project that really makes everybody, or almost everybody, better off. And I will explain to you how that is the case in a moment. The Health Impact Fund is a structural reform, a reform in how we incentivize pharmaceutical innovation. And it's a reform that brings enormous benefits in terms of cost effectiveness and health impact achieved for money. And these benefits will primarily go to the poor, but they will definitely also go to wealthier populations. Now, to explain the Health Impact Fund, I have to first tell you a little bit about the status quo, about the situation as it is now. The situation now is characterized by the TRIPS agreement, which stands for Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. That is an agreement that was concluded in the context of the new WTO treaty, World Trade Organization treaty, in the mid-1990s. And that agreement basically commits all the WTO member states to a very high standard of intellectual property protection. That goes for trademarks, for patents, for copyrights. All of these things have to be protected very strongly, like the United States and other Western countries had protected them before. Before the TRIPS agreement came into effect, India, for example, which is the most important country for my topic, had lower levels of intellectual property protection. You could get a patent in India, but only a process patent. A process patent protects a way of making a medicine, but not the medicine itself. And so it was possible for Indian generic companies to invent around the patent. They would find a new way of making the same medicine, and they would then compete with each other to to sell the medicine very cheaply to Indian patients and to African patients and to patients all over the world. Exactly this is what the big pharmaceutical companies of Western countries wanted to stop. They wanted to get a real monopoly. So they insisted that the Western governments should insist on product patents which protect the molecule itself, irrespective of how it is made. And these product patents became the law for all the WTO member states, even the poor countries, and on the 1st of January 2005. So since that time, even India has a product patent regime, and like all other WTO member states, it has to protect these patents for at least 20 years. 20 years from the time the patent application is filed, you have to protect the intellectual property. Now there are various problems with this system. There are obviously also good sides, but I will focus on 9 problems with the system. The first one is that high prices make it difficult for poor people to afford the medicine. And we have to understand why the prices are high. Somebody who has a monopoly will price the product in such a way as to maximize their product, their profit into the future. They don't care about the past cost. They care about the future profit. And prices are high for 2 reasons. One is that the rich patients will pay as much as they must pay to get the product. So if you have an important medicine and you raise the price, curve for pharmaceuticals. I'll quickly speak a bit louder. The rich are willing to pay very high prices, then it's optimal for pharmaceutical innovators to charge a very, very high price. So with medicines, as you probably know, prices can be 50, 60 times as high as the cost of production. It can be very cheap to make the medicine, but the markup is really very large. Here is the distribution of income in the world. You can see here that the top 5%, which is us basically, we have about 9 times the global average income. The bottom half of the human population altogether have only 3% of global income, and the bottom quarter has only a little more than 3/4 of 1% of global income. So the difference between the people in the top 5% and the people in the bottom quarter is about 300 to 1. It's a huge difference, and of course pharmaceutical companies, like all companies, they act in order to make money. They are profit maximizing companies, and so they go after us and not after the patients in the bottom half. They're not very profitable targets of pharmaceutical research and pharmaceutical marketing. So that's the first problem. The second problem is closely related. Pharmaceutical innovation is focusing on the diseases of rich people and neglecting diseases of poor people, like schistosomiasis, dengue, Chagas, malaria, and so on. We have a lot more good products for hair loss than we do for Chagas or schistosomiasis. And the reason is the same reason. Pharmaceutical companies are focused on making money, and you can make more money by catering to the diseases of wealthy people than by catering for diseases of the poor. If you have a very good medicine for a disease that only poor people have, then you have a very bad choice. Either you sell it at a low price that poor people can afford, in which case your profit margin is small, or you sell it at a very high price, in which case you have no customers. You can see here the consequence of that. There's the famous 10-90 gap, which is the gap that 10% of all pharmaceutical research expenditure is focused on diseases that account for 90% of the global burden of disease. And conversely, 90% of research money is focused on diseases that account for only 10% of the global burden of disease. So research today is not tracking what is really important to human beings. It's tracking what pharmaceutical companies can hope to be rewarded for, not surprisingly, of course. Here are some more examples. We had, over a 30-year period, 1,556 new medicines, of which only 18 were for tropical diseases and 3 for tuberculosis. So, very important diseases concentrated among the poor are not researched very much. A third problem is that there are two strong incentives to create Me Too drugs. Me Too drugs are medicines that are similar to existing drugs, but really not better or not much better. So this happens, for example, statins are one example. So there's the first company that makes a statin, and then the other companies say, oh, that's a very profitable medicine, I want to have a statin as well. And so they create a similar medicine and try then to win market share from the first company. These medicines are sometimes, it's nice to have 2 or 3 medicines that do the same job, or even 6 medicines that do the same job, but the problem is it doesn't really add very much to the arsenal of medicines, and also these companies don't reduce the price, they still keep the price high, so the world is really not better off by having additional Me Too medicines. But these Me Too medicines have one disadvantage. They reduce the reward for the breakthrough drug. So the first really true innovator who made the first medicine in a therapeutic class will find very quickly that their profits are diminished by similar inventions made by other companies who are then competing very aggressively over market share. There's also a bias towards maintenance drugs. So medicines can be loosely divided into 3 groups. There are medicines that cure, that kick the disease out of your body, medicines that prevent, which don't let the disease into your body, like a vaccine, and then medicines that do neither, but make you feel better and function better. And those medicines, of course, get the most attention from the pharmaceutical industry, because the most profitable patient is a patient who does not die and does not get well, because that patient buys the medicine again and again. That's a priority that we should not really want pharmaceutical companies to have. And it shows again that the rules under which we place pharmaceutical companies are not the best rules. There are substantial expenses with patenting and litigation. Pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money, but they also lose a lot of money, which they spend on patenting in many different countries, and especially on fighting lawsuits against each other and against generic companies in many, many different countries. So a lot of this wonderful profit goes to lawyers, and again, that is not what we should be happy about as customers and patients. There's also, especially in the United States, the problem of excessive marketing. We have about one marketing person for every 5 doctors going to doctors' offices and recommending medicines to prescribe, and also a lot of direct-to-consumer advertising, which tells patients to ask their doctor about this, that, or the other medicine. In the developing world, a similar problem, also due to the high difference between cost and price, is counterfeiting. So when a drug is sold at a very high price, let's say €2 for one pill, then it doesn't take long until a clever person says, I can make a pill that looks very similar, and I will sell that fake pill to people and make a lot of money. That happens a lot in developing countries, and often the pill is inert, there's nothing in it, or it's sometimes toxic, but often the pill is diluted. So you take a good pill, you divide it into 10 slices, and you repackage each of these 10 slices into one new pill, and that way people feel a little bit better, they think they're getting the real. Calgary is our economist. We have a whole bunch of very distinguished medical people on board, Mel Spiegelberg, Harvey Rubin, and so on, top-line people in medicine, some epidemiologists, and so on. So it's very much a collective effort, and we also have a few prominent supporters who are helping us in politically implementing the Health Impact Fund. A former Canadian Prime Minister, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, Chris Murray, chairman of NICE, he also had a Nobel Prize. And so these people are on our board of advisors and help us reach politicians and the media in order to make the fund more attractive and more well known. So how does it work? The Health Impact Fund is a complement to the ordinary patent regime. A complement, that means that it is parallel. It doesn't change the normal system. It simply adds something to the normal system. And what it adds is the opportunity for pharmaceutical innovators to register any new medicine. You can register the medicine with the Health Impact Fund, and if you do that, you get a reward. The reward is that during the first 10 years that your medicine is on the market, you get payments every year that are proportional to the health impact of your medicine. The more health impact your medicine has, the more money you get. This money comes out of annual pools of money. We think of about $6 billion a year, 4 billion euros every year. And these pools are simply divided up every year in proportion to health impact. So if 20 medicines are registered with the Health Impact Fund, and if your medicine is one of these 20 and it accounts for 8% of the health impact of all the registered medicines, then you get 8% of the pool in that year. 8% of 6 billion, $480 million. The same thing repeats next year and the year after, and after 10 years your reward is finished and you have received whatever you will receive for your research and development effort. Now, as often in life, when you get a nice thing, you have to give something up. And what you have to give up with the Health Impact Fund is the opportunity to mark up the price. So you have to promise to sell the medicine everywhere in the world at cost. So instead of getting the patent reward, the markup, the increase in the price, instead of that, the Health Impact Fund offers you this other reward based on the health impact of your medicine. Now, how do we know what the cost of production is? Well, one very simple way of finding that out is to ask the registrant to put the production of the medicine out for tender. So the registrant asks competing manufacturers how much they would charge to produce the drug. The cheapest reliable manufacturer gets the contract, sells the product to the innovator, and the innovator then sells the product on at the very same price. This is actually what today happens already. Most medicine is not produced by Bayer in Berlin or in Germany, or by a Spanish company somewhere in Spain. Most medicine is produced in India with APIs from China, so there's a lot of outsourcing of medicines already. So we are simply piggybacking off that system and asking the innovator to sell the medicine at the same price at which they buy it. Now, the Health Impact Fund is a kind of prize fund. And you may have heard of prizes or advanced market commitments already, but the Health Impact Fund is a very unique kind of prize. It works differently from ordinary prizes. First, it's different in that here there's not one specific health problem or disease that is targeted. The Health Impact Fund targets all diseases. If you target one disease, there's always the danger of lobbying. So when we had the AMC, initially it was supposed to be for malaria, but then there was a lot of lobbying, and finally it became a AMC for pneumococcal disease. So the Health Impact Fund is very open. It says, you bring me whatever medicine you like, and the better it is, the more money you get from us. So we don't have to select diseases. Secondly, when you do a prize, you have to define a finish line. You have to say very precisely what counts as winning the prize. That's difficult to do before the research has been done. It's very hard to know what sort of a medicine is possible. The Health Impact Fund doesn't define a finish line. It just says, you bring us the medicine, and if it's better, you get more money. You get paid on the basis of health impact. Every medicine qualifies. Every medicine wins a prize, but a poor medicine wins much less money than a medicine that achieves a lot of impact. And thirdly, we also don't have to decide how much reward each innovator should get. The reward is simply decided by demand and supply of innovation. All the innovators are competing with each other for a limited amount of money that is in the annual pools. Over 10 years, you participate in $60 billion. $6 billion multiplied by 10 years. And how much money you get depends on how many other people are competing with you, how many other people are registering drugs. That may sound very scary, very uncertain. But really, it's not that uncertain, because you know that when the rate of reward becomes low, that will deter innovators. People will no longer register medicines, they will stay away, and the reward rate will recover. Conversely, if the reward rate is very high, then innovators will say, that's a good opportunity, let's register a drug, and the reward rate will come down. That will reassure taxpayers that the pharmaceutical companies will not reap a huge windfall from the Health Impact Fund. So the rate of reward will always be reasonable because it is self-adjusting. If it falls too low, it will rise because registrations will stay away. If it rises too high, it will fall because registrations will accelerate, will come forward. Now, the Health Impact Fund avoids the 9 problems that I mentioned. It avoids the problem of access, of high prices, because every medicine on the Health Impact Fund is cheap. Every medicine is at cost or even below. in some cases, an innovator will want to sell the medicine below cost, because some people are very, very poor, and to reach them, you have to give them a special offer. You have to make the price even lower, and it's worth it, because if you reach them, you get additional health impact rewards. You reach more people, you get more money. So you lose a penny on reaching very poor people, but you win more money back by improving their health. Secondly, the Health Impact Fund gives very powerful new incentives to look after the big diseases of the poor. Those diseases become very profitable targets of research and development efforts. There are lots and lots of people who suffer severely under these neglected diseases, and if you can reduce the damage that they do, you can make a lot of money on the Health Impact Fund system. Third, the incentive towards Me Too drugs is weakened for two reasons. One is that if you have a Me Too drug and put it on the Health Impact Fund, then you get no money. Because, or in any case, if there's another drug before you on the Health Impact Fund, you get no money, because if you switch people over from an old drug to a new drug that is no better, then that is not rewarded. Taking away market share from another company without improving the health of patients gets no reward. You get a reward only if you reach new patients with your drug. But more importantly, Me Too drugs now run a risk. If they are patented, they run a risk, because if you have 6 or 7 or 8 Me Too drugs in one therapeutic class, and a 9th drug comes and registers with the Health Impact Fund and is sold at a very low price, then suddenly all the old Me Too drugs are losing their market share, because patients and insurance companies and national health systems will prefer to buy the new, cheaper drug. So Me Too drug production becomes a risky business when the Health Impact Fund is also in existence. This means that there will be larger rewards for genuine innovators, because they are not so much threatened by Me Too drugs. There's no bias towards maintenance drugs, because the Health Impact Fund pays for all types of medicines equally. So if you can cure a disease with one single pill, and the person is better for 20 years or lives another 20 years, you get paid for the full 20 years, even if you achieve that with only a single medicine, with only a single treatment. There is much less litigation and deadweight losses. Litigation essentially is a thing of the past, because the Health Impact Fund registered medicines are very, very cheap, and no generic company wants to compete, right? Who wants to compete with a drug that is already as cheap as it can possibly be? There's also no incentive to counterfeit, because, again, the real thing is available at a very low price, and so you cannot profit very much by selling fakes that look the same and are slightly cheaper. There is also a significant impact on the last mile problems, on all the difficulties that exist in poor countries. Not enough doctors, not enough nurses, not enough hospitals, refrigerators, diagnostic equipment, you name it. It's all lacking in poor countries. But the Health Impact Fund gives incentives to pharmaceutical companies to participate in efforts to overcome these problems. So any time your medicine does not reach poor people whom it can help, you're losing money. If you reach these patients, you make money through health impact rewards. If you do not reach these patients, you make no money. So pharmaceutical companies with registered products will try very hard to help overcome these problems, to help supply refrigerators perhaps, or to help overcome these problems of doctors and nurses going to richer countries, brain drain as they call it. And all these different problems are now problems that pharmaceutical companies will have an incentive to help overcome together with local health ministries, international agencies, and NGOs. And you can see here that these problems are massive still. We have enormous problems in the developing world, enormous health deficits, and so we certainly need help in overcoming these last mile problems in order to deal with many of these health deficits. Now let me say a little about the economics of drug development. It's very, very expensive to make a new drug. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And here two things are especially worth mentioning. Clinical trials are very expensive, especially phase 3. And also, you have to remember that for every drug that succeeds, there are several drugs that fail. And so the successful drugs have to make enough money to pay for the unsuccessful drugs if research and development are to be sustainable. So we have to make sure that pharmaceutical innovators of all types make enough money to continue with their innovation activity. 6 billion is, in a sense, not a great deal of money. 6 billion is 0.01% of the sum of all gross national products, and it's about 0.6% of what the world now spends on pharmaceuticals. So we are now spending already $1 trillion, 1,000 billion or 1,000 miljarden, I think, in Catalan, dollars on pharmaceuticals, on medicines, and the Health Impact Fund would add only a small amount to that. But that small amount would get us much more health impact than the money that we are now spending is buying us. Since innovation is one big purpose of the Health Impact Fund, we have to make sure that innovators understand that they will in fact be rewarded. It takes about 10 years, I said that before, for a medicine to be ready for the market. And so somebody who starts a research project today wants to know that the Health Impact Fund has money in the 2020s, from 2020 to 2030. Only governments can promise such money. Others can contribute, but governments have to provide the core funding for the Health Impact Fund, and we hope that governments will be willing to contribute 0.03% of their gross national income to the Health Impact Fund. That money is partly coming back to us, taxpayers, because we also benefit from the lower price for drugs. So if you look at this diagram, so textbook 101 diagram, the current system is you have high economic price. This is the profit. This is the super surplus where people like you and me get the medicine at lower price. even though not every consumer benefits. Bill Gates, for example, will not benefit because he will pay more in taxes, a lot more in taxes, 0.03%. But that's so much money that he couldn't be sick long enough and severely enough to get his money's worth by cheaper medicines. But ordinary consumers in the world, average consumers, will benefit from that system because of the enormous deadweight losses, about $200 to $250 billion every year, that disappear. Now, how do we assess health impact? Basically, we use a metric that is already very well introduced for the last 20 years, called quality adjusted life years, or QALYs. Basically, you can say very simply that a human life has 80 QALYs, namely you live 80 years long and you're always perfectly healthy. So then it's 80 centimeters long and 1 centimeter high, and that's your life in QALYs. But of course, not everybody is so lucky. Some people die early, and some people are sick throughout their life at some point. And if you're sick, then this plank becomes narrower, and if you live shorter, then it becomes shorter. So most human lives may have 67 QALYs or 32 QALYs or something like that. Now, diseases take away QALYs, and these same QALYs can be restored by medicines. Medicines can prevent the taking away of QALYs by diseases. And that's what we count. We count how many QALYs are protected by a medicine. We are trying to estimate that, and that we can do for the different diseases, and then measure the health impact of every product by the same metric. Now, measuring that is difficult and expensive, and it can never be precise. We have to estimate, we have to use statistical methods to estimate how much good a medicine does. We look at the sales figures, we look at the clinical trial data, and we also do representative sampling in many locations to figure out who is taking the medicine and how much benefit they get. Are they taking the medicine in the right way, for example? Are they getting the optimal benefit? Are they the right patients for whom the medicine is indicated? And so on. So through different methods, one other method is to correlate data about sales with data about the global burden of disease. So for example, if a company with a malaria product is selling a lot more medicine in Uganda than in Kenya, then you would expect that malaria will go down more in Uganda than in Kenya. If that happens, that's confirmation that the medicine really has an effect. If it doesn't happen, you begin to wonder, and you look at many other countries to see whether the medicine really is effective. So there are different methods, and we are pioneering these now with pilots, different methods for estimating the health impact of a medicine. We don't hope to make it very precise, but precise enough so that innovators will trust the system and cannot manipulate it, cannot game the system. Let me conclude by saying that the Health Impact Fund, I think, is exactly the kind of reform that we need in the present world, in the present environment. It's not a one-off band-aid that solves a little problem here or a little problem there. It's a structural reform that provides a permanent source of new medicines for all the future. The Health Impact Fund is like a machine that always targets those health problems that are most severe and can be most cost-effectively overcome. It provides incentives for innovators to focus on where the greatest health damage is being done by diseases and to work on solutions for which they can then be rewarded. It also is nice because it represents a moralization of institutional design. The Health Impact Fund has a very simple principle. The health of every human being counts, and counts equally. It doesn't matter whether the patient you cure is rich or poor, you get money, you get reward on the basis of how much health improvement you bring to that patient, regardless of any further fact about that patient. The Health Impact Fund proposal does not oppose the establishment, the rich and the mighty. To the contrary, it is actually quite beneficial for at least one very important lobby, namely the pharmaceutical companies. They have some gain out of the $6 billion, and they also have reputational gains because they can now, for the first time, profitably do more for the developing world and poor populations. So they can hope for an image improvement. Obviously, pharmaceutical companies are skeptical and they have objections and so on, but I think this is at least the kind of proposal that pharmaceutical companies can make peace with, can live with. The Health Impact Fund proposal is scalable, which means that we can start relatively small with just $6 billion, and we can gradually increase the fund. For example, by additional countries contributing, or by countries contributing a larger share of their gross national product. Scalability is important for two reasons. One is that we can start small. It's easier to get to the creation of the Health Impact Fund. And secondly, it's also good that as we increase the size of the Health Impact Fund, we can learn from experience. So any mistake we might have made, any unforeseen problem, we can try to solve it before we make it bigger. The Health Impact Fund strengthens the people we want to strengthen, we want to give more voice and influence to, namely poor people. Poor people who are now weighed down by heavy disease burdens and enormous poverty will benefit the most from the Health Impact Fund and will be more able to fend for themselves, to defend their own interests. And finally, the Health Impact Fund is a model for reforms that can also work in other areas. It's replicable. So if the Health Impact Fund works well for pharmaceuticals, then, for example, we can also think of something like that for seeds and can say anybody who has a new seed that avoids the use of pesticide or fertilizer or increases the nutrient yield of a crop, any such person should give that seed without a license fee to the whole world. Everybody should be able to use that seed, and the innovator should be paid on the basis of results, on the basis of nutrient yield increased, pesticide use reduced, and so on. Similarly, for green or clean technologies, if you have a good new green or clean technology, let the world have it for free, license it to everybody at zero cost, and get rewarded on the basis of the pollution that is reduced, emissions that are avoided. That way, innovators have an incentive to diffuse the new invention to everybody. As many people as possible should use it, and that without any increase in price. It's absurd that in many developing countries today, factories and power plants are built on very antiquated models, blueprints, because they don't want to pay the high price of new innovative technologies. It would be much better if we gave them the latest technology for free and then rewarded the innovator on the basis of emissions reduced. So the Health Impact Fund is a fertile reform. It's a reform that, if we can make it happen, will open the road for other reforms of a similar nature. Thank you. Good. I invite questions, comments, criticisms, and expressions of outrage. this? The answer is very clear, yes, absolutely right. So if the governments of the world came to me tomorrow and said, dear Pogge, here is $6 billion a year, please spend it in the best possible way. I would not spend it on the health impact fund. I would spend it exactly as you say, on clean water, on sanitation, maybe education. So you're completely right about it. The problem is the governments are not doing it. The demand that you just made has been made again and again for 40 years, and the money is not coming. If you look at development aid today, very, very little development aid is spent on these kinds of projects that are the most urgent. Only about 15 billion is spent every year on basic social services, and so that's about 10% or a little bit more than 10% of all development aid. So I think that effort has been made. The idea is there something that we can do that also motivates, that is politically realistic and motivates governments to do more? And I was thinking that the Health Impact Fund, because it also gives benefits to rich countries in terms of more rational provision with pharmaceuticals, is the system, and because it also, of course, benefits the pharmaceutical companies, is a system for which additional money can most easily be won. That's the idea. So this is a political idea. It's not saying that this is the most cost-effective way to overcome the disease problems in the developing world, but it's a realistic way of getting new money diverted to this very important purpose. Sorry. So on the second point, there is the very important principle of the Health Impact Fund. Everybody pays the same price. So there's no reason all over the world. You don't have to ship drugs from Africa to France to make them cheap. You can buy them in your French pharmacy at the same price as you can buy them in Africa. So that's the first thing, that we try to get rid of this problem of parallel imports, of these smuggling from one country to the other. So Health Impact Fund drugs are cheap everywhere. The second thing is, you are right, of course, that some people find even the cost of production, the cost of manufacturing a drug, quite expensive. And so they couldn't afford the drug even at a low price. So take the AIDS medicines. What we saw with AIDS is it started at $10,000 a year, and then it came down to a little bit below 100 for the first line treatments. That's where it's now. The second line treatments are currently around 1,000, maybe 1,200 or so per year. That's still a very large amount and unaffordable for poor people. Absolutely right. Now, but here again, the difference between the $100 that it costs per year for the first line treatment and the $1,000 for second line, that's patenting. That's the cost of the R&D, the patent. So on the Health Impact Fund, the medicine would be sold at cost, and so second line treatments as well would be available for the same price roughly as first line treatments, $100 a year. That is still too much, you're right, for many poor people. And so there, one of two things can happen. One thing that can happen is that at least health ministries or international agencies like UNICEF or whatever, they can purchase the product, NGOs, Médecins Sans Frontières, they can have a much better chance of providing the product at an affordable price or even at zero cost if they themselves pay only $100 a year than if they paid $1,000 a year. You can reach many more patients. Others can step in. And the other thing that will happen is that the innovator will itself have reason to lower the price below cost. So if my cost is, let's say, $100 per year per patient, and I see that there are patients out there who can only afford 40, then I ask myself, well, if I subsidize the drug and sell it for 40, then do I get more than $60 back in terms of added health impact? If I do, then it's worth it for me to lower the price to reach patients who cannot afford the 100. So obviously, even with the Health Impact Fund system, the drug will not reach each and every patient who needs it, but it will reach vastly more people than are currently being reached under the existing system. People don't have to wait until the patent expires, and they will get the drug at cheaper prices than today generic companies can supply them for. Yes, please. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the orphan drugs are basically drugs that are for a disease that only a few people have. So I spent this morning 2 hours discussing with a guy in Los Angeles about sickle cell anemia, which is one of those relatively rare diseases. About 1 in 375 black people has it, and about 1 in 1,500 white people has it. So it's not very common. And we were thinking about a pilot. There are about 15 million people in the world. There's a new L-glutamine promising drug in the pipeline that could potentially work for, or is very likely to work, in fact, for sickle cell anemia. And so that is already a large enough number of people to make it worthwhile. So the problem is this. Under the current system, if you have a great innovation for sickle cell anemia, and you say, I want to sell that maybe at 40 times the cost of production, how many customers do you have? Well, you have 15 million sick people, But of those 15 million sick people, only maybe 200, 300,000 can afford the medicine. So it's really a small group. And so it may not be worth developing a medicine. But with the Health Impact Fund, the whole 15 million people are there who can produce health impact for your medicine. So it's more lucrative. But still, you're completely right that the larger the patient population is, other things being equal, the more money you make. And so the Health Impact Fund will first attract innovators to larger diseases, if they are equally severe, and then later to smaller diseases. So you can think about it, this is a metaphor that economists use. They are low-hanging fruit that are easy to harvest, where you can make easy money. The easy money is made under the Health Impact Fund with diseases that are severe, very widespread, and currently affect the poor. So nobody has really researched them because the patients are poor. So those fruits will be harvested first. And as we develop good medicines for those diseases, then we go up the tree and we harvest the rarer diseases, which are maybe not so severe, and so on. Global diseases, which also affect rich people, and so forth. So the Health Impact Fund is a kind of harvesting machine that starts with the most cost-effective health interventions and then goes gradually to the less and less cost-effective ones. Rare diseases will not come first, they will come later. The rarer they are, the later. But I think that's perfectly appropriate, right? If you care about a small patient population of 1 million people, then surely you must care about a large patient population of 10 million people, other things being equal. So, given scarcity, let's help the 10 million first before we help the 1 million. It's wishful thinking, yes, to get the...
The first step is so efficient, so fantastically for your body. But the people don't the first step. The second step. That's not a criticism to your position because that's what happens now. So, but I don't think that this can produce a change of mind, change of policy.
Yeah, but the large diseases will gradually become smaller, right? So if we have a really good drug for schistosomiasis or Chagas or something, and if that drug really reaches poor people,
there are drugs which keep you alive.
Yes. Sure. Right. That may well be the case, but there is, at least once you have the innovation, then you have achieved most of the health impact. So if I give you a drug for 40 years that keeps you very healthy and functioning and in a good mood, then the health impact has been achieved. So no new innovator can come and can make more money of you. So the idea is that then the innovators, they say, well, this guy is already happy, he's already healthy, so now let's research something else. And so gradually you will focus on the remaining problems where people are still suffering and dying prematurely. Yes? After.
During the election,
Yeah. You're asking the wrong man, because I am a total amateur. A total amateur. I was a professor of philosophy for most of my life, And that prepares you for politics about zero, right? I was sitting at my desk studying Kant and Rawls and Hume and Plato and Hegel, and that's not a preparation to go to Washington or to go and talk to Pfizer or to Bayer. So I'm a total amateur. I don't know how one does that. My theory is you keep trying, and I feel like a little boy with matches. I try to light a fire, and I go around and try here and try there, and sometimes something starts burning, and sometimes, most of the time, nothing happens. And so, of course, I work with other people, but we have no lobbyists on our team. We have no PR people on our team. We don't have money to afford people like that, right? Professional. But we have large numbers of very enthusiastic students. We also have a lot of academics who are helping us. We have a law firm that is helping us. And we have a few ex-politicians who are helping us. And those ex-politicians, they know something. They got themselves elected at some point. So I've got a former congressman in Washington who's helping. I've got a politician in Germany who's very, very enthusiastic about it and is helping. And whether it can work or not, I don't think you can predict it or I can predict it. All I know is that if this happened, if we could get this established, it would be the most important thing that I could ever do in my life. And so I keep trying. And maybe in 10 years I say I wasted 10 years. But still, I think it was the right decision. It's the right thing to focus my efforts on. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Mm. Mm. Parsec. Yeah. But right, so that's completely right. And this plan does not for a moment assume that pharmaceutical companies will act in any other way but for profit. So I'm not using the pharmaceutical companies as a punching bag, as you say. I'm using us as a punching bag. I'm saying we are idiots because we are the ones who set the rules for the pharmaceutical companies. And under the rules as we have set them, these companies, of course, will not do the work that they should be doing. But whose fault is that, right? We shouldn't be surprised, exactly as you say, that pharmaceutical companies are profit maximizing companies just like all other companies are. So what we have to do, instead of scolding the pharmaceutical companies, is to change the rules and change the incentives so that what is profitable for them and what is important, morally important from our point of view, coincide better than it does so now. And that's what the Health Impact Fund tries to do, to create incentives, profit incentives, that lure the pharmaceutical companies to where they can actually make the best contributions. It's a win-win strategy. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I've talked with a bunch of companies. So Merck, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Sanofi, Gilead, Glaxo, Novartis. I've been everywhere. And the reaction is quite diverse. So first I have to say that there are many people in pharmaceutical companies who initially became pharmaceutical people because they wanted to help humanity, especially the researchers. Many scientists in these companies, they want to do something big for the developing world, a big disease, and then their bosses suddenly say to them, okay, just close that research and go over to the hair loss. And they are crying. You know, they were dreaming maybe of a Nobel Prize, but you don't get a Nobel Prize for hair loss. You get it for... You should, I know, but... Absolutely. That's why I'm using this example. But anyway, so the scientists are, they say, I wish that our companies could make money out of the neglected diseases of the poor, because that's what I would want to work on much more than on other stuff like dermatological problems or whatever. Now, what happened with the companies is interesting. Some companies like Glaxo and Gilead, for example, they came running after me and they said, this is brilliant. We want this. We will support you. If you need a pilot, look, we have got this drug and this drug. Use one of our drugs as a pilot and so on. They are really gung-ho. Bayer also has a person very high up who was absolutely gung-ho and wanted to do a pilot, moxifloxacin. And so, there's great enthusiasm. Then there are other companies like Pfizer. They say, just go away. This is a ridiculous idea. We don't want to deal with you. Just go home. And then there are companies in between where they were fighting in the company. And they said, so some people said, oh, Pogge, that's interesting. Let's look at him. And then others said, no, that's dangerous. We don't want to look at that. And so they had a little fight internally, and finally the good side won, and I was invited to write for their website and to come to their conference and so on. So the pharmaceutical companies are suspicious, of course, and they have one big worry. The worry is that when you have a disease for which 2 or 3 high-priced patented medicines are available, what happens when the 4th medicine for the same disease is registered with the Health Impact Fund? Then they lose their entire market. And that's what they're scared of. So they're saying this is a Pandora's box. It looks good, but there is a danger that once it goes to global diseases, we could lose more money than we win. And then, of course, what I do is I tell them, this is mostly going to be neglected diseases. In the first 10, 20 years, it's mostly neglected diseases. Don't worry. And by the time global diseases become, higher fruits, global diseases come within purview, by that time you're long retired. So you've got your bonus, you've got your golden parachute, and yeah, that's, yes. 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 So, yes, we want to collect data. We need better data, but we need better data for many purposes. We know too little about how medicines work. And it's amazing to me. That was one of the big surprises. So there is NICE in the United Kingdom.
NICE is very scientifically looking at whether the national health system should pay for medicine or not. And they make the decision on the basis of health impact. But they make the decision on the basis only of clinical trial data. And nobody looks afterwards. Now, in a clinical trial, the medicine can do very well because every patient who gets it